Earl.
Okay.
And happy birthday, Larcine. It's your birthday weekend.
It is my birthday weekend.
Yay, poor Larcine.
It's my Al-Anon anniversary. It's 39 years yesterday. So fun times. Anyway, Earl and I are going to share, he's going to share some of his story, and then some of mine is, as when he was a kid and then, got into the disease and then I'll share about that. And then I think it's going to try and go back to him a little bit. He'll share about his recovery and then I'll share a little bit about mine. So this is my son, Earl.
Hi, my name's Earl and I'm an alcoholic. It's really good to see you guys today. I grew up in an AA family. My father got sober in 1979 when I was 3 years old, and my mom joined Al-Anon about 2 years later, somewhere in there. And, growing up, I don't have any recollection of my father's drinking, but around Christmas time, we all like to sit around and tell stories about it, which was kind of cool. Like the time dads would come home and he'd pass out on the floor, and me and my brother would build castles on top of them out of building blocks and stuff like that. And my dad doesn't think that's a really cool story, but we think it's hysterical. I think it's one of our favorites. Or the time dad came home and he decided to build me a big wheel, except he was so drunk he put the handlebars on backwards. So for a couple of years, I was driving around with a big wheel with backwards handlebars. and then once he got sober, he decided he was going to switch them back and put them the right way. And I apparently threw some giant fit. So I rode around with backwards handlebars on my big wheels. And that's why I'm an alcoholic. But, growing up in an AA family was a lot of fun. We did all the AA stuff, went to all the jamborees and all the cookouts, and always had meetings at the house and stuff like that, and growing up in AA, it was always something archaic to me. I never really understood as a child. You hear about alcoholism and the disease of drugs and alcohol, but as a child, it really didn't resonate with me what it all really meant. I just thought it was a group of people that like to hang out with each other and have a good time. That was always my first interpretation of Alcoholics Anonymous. But around the age of 12 is when I started experimenting with drugs. I remember my parents went out to an AA and an Al-Anon meeting on like a random Tuesday night when I was a kid, and I decided to experiment with some LSD, for my first time. And I remember about an hour and a half later, it was kicking in and they came home, and I remember being out on my front lawn, throwing up and walking back inside and looking at the expression of horror on my mother's face that her 12-year-old was on drugs. So she starts freaking out and she wants to take me to the hospital and doesn't know what's going on. And then my father hears this commotion and he comes walking in from the bedroom and he's like, "Okay, Earl, what'd you take? How much did you take?" And I showed him everything I took and all that kind of stuff. So then he walks into the kitchen and he pours a glass of milk and he sits me down on the sofa and he gives me the glass of milk. And he goes in and he puts some Mozart on the stereo and says, "Okay, son, have a nice trip." And he goes back to bed. My mom, on the other hand, did not go back to bed, and she stayed up with me the entire night just staring at me, which was pretty trippy in itself, I guess you could say. I remember the cat floating by like it was a big fuzzy balloon, and I started giggling a little bit because I was so high, and my mom's just sitting there like, "Oh, is this fun for you? Is this the part you like? Are you having a good time? Because I am having a blast." That was a long night, but I tell you, that's what kind of started my journey to AA. We joke about a lot of things, but by the time I was 16, I was so strung out I couldn't even see straight. I lived on a combination of methamphetamine and LSD, usually 3 days up on amphetamines, and then I'd take LSD to come down. I wasn't eating anything. I think I was down to about 100 pounds at that point. My teeth were just beginning to fall out at that time, I think. I had a couple rotten ones. Dreadlocks in my hair because I never washed or cleaned or anything like that. I remember having stacks and stacks of food stashed under my bed. My mom would make me dinner every night, but I was so strung out I couldn't eat it. So I'd hide it under there so no one could see what was going on. And it was a really hard time in my life, That stuff really got a hold of me, and I don't know how it was for my parents. I wasn't really conscious of what they were going through at the time. It never crossed my mind what this might be doing to everybody else around me, because I was so sick in my disease and I was so self-absorbed in it, I couldn't see anyone else's point of view or what I was putting through. I was kind of only concerned with me at that time. I don't know if that's partly being a teenager or being a drug addict at the same time. But I never had any intention of hurting my parents with anything I was doing. It just never came into my mind at all. It wasn't until I got sober and we sat down and started talking about this kind of stuff, I began to understand the toll it took on them. But at the time, it didn't really mean anything to me. I was so gone. I don't know how it was for you. You want to talk a little bit about those early years? Or?
Okay, if you want to just go back and forth.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Larcine. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. And, even now when Earl talks about this, and that was a long time ago, I mean, it still was very emotional to me. Because he's my son and I love him and I care about him. And even when Earl started doing the things that he was doing with drugs and all that, I've been in Al-Anon several years and I know the drill here, I know what we're supposed to do. And, but then, when it's your own kid, I had an alcoholic dad, I had an alcoholic husband. My dad died from his alcoholism. My husband, was fortunate enough to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I've kind of seen which way it could go. I've been, that it can really literally go either way here. And so, but when it was Earl, I was so totally unprepared for it because I lived under the illusion that because, he was so little when his dad got sober, and he really didn't have any remembrances of his dad's drinking and that, his dad was in AA and I was in Al-Anon and he was going with me to Al-Anon meetings and, and with his dad to AA meetings that for some reason, I just had it in my head that, this was like the magic potion or whatever that was going to prevent anything like that from happening to my children. And so when I think about, and again, I tried one more time, even though I was coming to Al-Anon, I tried to apply that, like I can fix this, because it was one thing when it was my dad, I was the little kid, that was a different situation. It was another thing when it was my husband because I was the wife. But this is my underage child. I am his parent. I am responsible for him. I am responsible for what's going on in his life, and it's my job to fix it when things, aren't right. And I know as a parent, there's a lot of things we can do, but as an Al-Anon, I know without a shadow of a doubt that I cannot fix another human being, especially from the disease of alcoholism or drug addiction. If that was in our power to do it, I'm here to tell you, if a parent could do it, you're looking at her, okay? Because I am a force to be reckoned with when I make up my mind about crap. I always joke about how, when my husband was drinking and, and he never wanted to do anything or go anywhere, but I would make us go and have a freaking family picnic. I'd force everybody in the freaking car, and we, and nobody wants to go, but by God, we're having a freaking picnic, and off we would go and it would be like the most miserable day of the universe. But by God, we had a picnic, and again, when we talk at Al-Anon about trying to force solutions. And, and if loving your kids could fix them, I don't think that anybody would need to be an Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous, but that is not the deal here. And so, I was 7 years in Al-Anon when Earl started, like I say, his drug stuff. And at 12 too. Again, totally unprepared for that. Everything was just so off from me. He was too young. He started with freaking LSD. I've been to AA meetings. You're not supposed to start with LSD. You're supposed to start with marijuana. And then you work your way up, not only am I dealing with a 12-year-old, I'm dealing with a 12-year-old who's not doing things in order, which to me is, it has to be in order, and yes, it does. And, and just the craziness of that, and then my husband, is, and this is the time too, that I need to let you know that, despite even during my husband's drinking, I don't think that he and I in our marriage ever fought as much as we did when my son started doing drugs and alcohol, because Butch is an alcoholic, knew that Earl would have to find his own path. I'm the person in Al-Anon who you would think would be able to deal with it just a little bit better than that, but I think he had that knowledge way ahead of me because I was just the mom. When Earl talks about that first night being on LSD, how am I supposed to go to bed when my kid is taking some horrible drug as far as I'm concerned? Somebody has to stay up all night with him. And I stayed up all night with him, but I tell you, it wasn't for his benefit. It was for mine. Because that's how, again, fear drives me all the time, and when I think about all that time, I want to tell you how much I love my son and I was concerned about my son. But in reality, my fear was always, what would happen to me if anything happens to him? I really get down to the absolute truth of what my feelings were at the time. And I was absolutely terrified. But even during that time, I was sure, he's a kid. You ground them, do this to them, take this away from them, like all those kinds of things would fix what was going on with him. Because one more time, I'm trying to think that, if the consequences are severe enough, he will do something about what's going on with him. He will change. If he gets punished, and I think that thinking for me is because of how I grew up, but I grew up in a house where, again, my dad beat the crap out of us. So you'll learn really early on, don't piss your dad off, do whatever he tells you, because you're going to get the crap beat out of you. And I wasn't a person that literally beat my kids, but I will tell you that I did physically hit my children, nothing like my dad, but at the same token, that's what I learned to do. And that's what I would do. And so there was these times when I would just, really be trying to help Earl. And then I would get to the level where I was so frustrated with him, I would slap him and hit him, and again, not anything that I'm proud to report to you 7 years into the program at this point, knowing that wasn't the answer, but that is the level of frustration it would take me to, because one more time, I'm trying to understand in my head why this is happening. And then therefore, once I figure out why or what I did or all of that garbage, then I can fix it. In reality, what I'm dealing with is I'm dealing with a disease. And that is not something you can fix them, this logical thing, because alcoholism and drug addiction is not logical. When we talk about cunning, baffling, and powerful, the cunning part, that's, it's just what goes on there. And again, my illusion that, there's something I did, what didn't I not do? Because I want you to know Earl and I were very close. I mean, we just have always been. He's always been a really good kid. And up until that point, I loved him. He loved us. No troubles whatsoever. And then, but it's just as soon as this started, I mean, it was just like straight up. I mean, it wasn't just like he did a little bit and then he was okay. I mean, it was just straight up, until like he talks about being 16 years old. And I'm watching this happen to my kid. And every time I try to talk to my kid about it, my kid denies it. He says he's not doing this. I'm too sensitive to all of this. Why don't I stop writing him like I'm writing him? And I go back and forth. I go back working an Al-Anon program, and that works for me for 10 minutes. And then when I don't get the results I want, then I go right back into my old behavior, yelling, screaming, trying to control, trying to manipulate, trying to do those things. So, and that's just, again, the insanity that I had to go through in my own way, to try it, because I'm trying to cope with it and I am trying to fix it. Because in my head, the Larcine head, I can make this better. But in the Al-Anon Larcine heart, I know that this is his journey. And what I am supposed to be doing, I am unable to do because I am so driven by this fear. Eventually, what ended up happening for me is that I had to, turn myself back into my sponsor in my meeting, because for, a while, and when I say a while, I mean probably a couple of years, I acted like I was handling it A-okay. How's it? Fine, I got it. When in reality, I wasn't. But I don't want to turn myself into you like, I'm here for 7 years. It's not working. So therefore, there's something wrong with me, because I think working an Al-Anon program means the people in your life get sober and do what you want them to do. That's not the Al-Anon program, and I know that. But again, they say the biggest journey is going from here to here. And so when I was able to turn myself back into, my sponsor and my group and saying, I'm dying here. This is just really killing me. I am so unhappy at home. I can't even tell you, I hate going home again. I'm so fearful about what's going to happen. And, and again, it's just, Al-Anon one day at a time. No one criticized me. No one said, oh, Larcine, you're not working a program. They said to me, no, Larcine, that's hard. My sponsor used to tell me, kids are the hardest duty you're ever going to do. But the program applies to them as much as it does anyone else, and so they back on the track, back about unconditional love. My sponsor made me look up unconditional, and you know what it says? No conditions, because that's what I really had to learn, that no matter what happened to my son or what he was doing, and again, I want to say, what Carrie shared today. I mean, my heart is with her so much. I understand, exactly that pain and all of that, when all that stuff is going on. And, but that was the deal. I had to learn that no matter what he was doing, that didn't affect my love for him, and in truth, and Al-Anon to me is all about what's really the truth. And the truth is I love my kid. I love my kid exactly how he stands. Be it sober, that's easier loving, no doubt about it, or be it, if that's, if he's going to be out there doing that, is that really going to affect my love? Do I love him less because he is, drinking and doing drugs? Then I would love him if he was like, doing my dream thing, going to college, making me look good, which is, again, what that's all about, is if I really want to be truthful. And the bottom line is I love this kid no matter what. And that's where I got my strength from. That's where I got my ability to go on and do my day-to-day stuff, was just that I love this kid no matter what. And like I say, that's what helped to get from, the heart to my head. I used to say to my sponsor, how am I supposed to be happy, joyous, and free when I've got a kid out there who could possibly die, behind this disease, and I'm supposed to be happy, joyous, and free? And I remember Carol telling me, Larcine, if you're not happy, joyous, and free, then you offer that child no hope. And that's my deal, because it's regardless of whether the alcoholic is drinking or not. Those aren't just words on a page to suck us in. That's the truth, but we're the ones that have to live our life. I can't live his life. And I think as a parent, that's the hardest thing, is trying not to live their life, because obviously, how can you see your dad? How can? Because he's suffering from a disease that's not letting him see any of that stuff. Again, always having to remind myself, Larcine, he's not doing this to you. He's doing it because this is what he does. And I tell you, I have been to thousands and thousands of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I have yet once to hear an alcoholic or a drug addict get up to the podium and say, I used and I drank because I wanted to hurt my parents, my family. Ever have I heard that? It's the disease of alcoholism. And it's really, really hard to separate the disease. And when we talk about that in meetings, separating the deal, so because I kept practicing it one day at a time to the best of my ability, I was able to love my son unconditionally while this stuff was going on. I had to go to school one time because, the principal's telling me that they're going to kick him out because he's selling marijuana at school. Apparently, they can kick you out of school for selling marijuana at school. And
it was a small amount.
It was a small amount, again. And it wasn't him. First, it wasn't even him, okay? And and this is the conversation we're having. Now, mind you, my son's been doing this all along. But he's telling me, Mom, I didn't do it. And with my heart, I want to believe with every fiber of my being, he's not doing it, So I go to school toe to toe with the principal, you're accusing my son, defending him, doing all of that stuff because I want to believe that he's really not doing it, when I can't even see reality right in front of my face. This is how I am affected by the disease of alcoholism, and I'm not the person doing it, and then a couple other little things happened, and then I caught him in the act of something, and that was a huge surrender for me right then. It's just like, this is what he's doing. You can keep trying to pretend, and you can go fight, and you can do all this, because one more time I had to be so hurt and accept the fact that my child lies to me. He lies to me. And I am devastated by that, but it's a reality for me. And again, one more time, separating him from the disease. My son doesn't lie to me. His disease lies to me, because that's what his disease has to do. And so Earl ended up having to go to continuation high school. This was like a huge insult to me, because I am like, this is not working for me. And I was very, very unhappy about it. And again,
I thought it was a major accomplishment.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, right. You go to continuation high school, it's like, God dang, it's like high school for kindergartens or something.
No, it's not. Well, go ahead.
I'm talking, it's my time now. Bug off. When it's your turn, I'll give it back. And so anyway, And so, and Earl, he was going, and again, getting him to school, doing those things, sometimes I could let it be his responsibility. Sometimes I still had to make it be mine. It's not about working it perfect. It's working it about the best you can every day. And it came time, and Earl was not going to get back into regular high school, which was devastating again to me. So he had to graduate from continuation high school. And I, again, was very upset about this. And and I wasn't going to go, because, one more time, unacceptable behavior. Why do I have to participate? This wasn't my idea. And my sponsor's like, you will go, you will be proud of him. He is doing the best he can, and that's all you can ask of him. And it's your job to be there and support him. And so my sponsor, you're going to dress up, you're going to look nice, you're going to have a party afterwards, and all this. And I'm so, so grateful for sponsors, because left to my own device, what I really want to do is hurt Earl like I believe he's hurting me. Again, bad head information. And again, with sponsor direction, this is what you're going to do, because this is really what's going on. Your son is graduating, and you will be proud of him. And, and you're not going to act like this is any less than anybody else's deal. So I don't know if you've ever been to continuation high school, and especially a graduation ceremony, but there's a lot of gangbangers in there and all that kind of stuff. And, and so, the audience is of mixed, all kinds of people. Let me just say that, and so they had balloons and all this, and a freaking balloon popped, and half the audience hit the floor because they thought a gun went off. Again, continuation high school graduation, and and we ended up having a party. And what I'm going to tell you about that to this day is, what? I went, and I was glad I was there, and I watched my son get his diploma from continuation, and I was proud of him. Because that's really what it's about. It's about accepting him exactly where he is and exactly what's going on in his life at the moment. And I am so grateful that I got sponsor direction to help me get through those times, because now I don't regret. Now I don't sit here this X amount of years later and go, yeah, and I didn't go to Earl's high school graduation because that pissed me off, and I wasn't going to do this and I wasn't going to do that. Life is in session right now. And you take the little victories along with the big old disappointments, but you don't want to miss those little victories either. So my gratitude to Al-Anon for being able to be there while he was doing those things, I am grateful for. I'm going to give it back to Earl now.
Yeah, I think it was that acceptance that meant, a lot to me. Had my parents pushed this program on me, I don't think I'd be sitting here sober today. The fact that they let me alone and let me walk my own path meant everything to me. So then when it was time for me to get sober, I can come to them, and I knew exactly where to go and where to seek help. One thing about members of AA and Al-Anon, they never pushed it on me. I can remember coming home stoned as a teenager, and there's walking into an Al-Anon meeting in my living room and forgetting that it was Tuesday night, and everyone just looked at me and welcomed me. They never said anything about what was going on. No one ever gave me a hard time about it. And it's that acceptance in this program that means everything to a newcomer. Had she pushed her will on me on what I need to do and how I had to do, I think I would have pushed back a hell of a lot harder. And I was always grateful for her unconditional love that way. For me in my teen years, that's kind of how it went. Like she said, I did get expelled from school, went to continuation high school, and I turned 21, and I went into the bar and I sat down, and I sat there for the next 16 years. And I drank. I met a girl at that time, and we fell in love, and she had 2 kids. So we decided to move in together and give it a go. And I can remember everything was good for about a year. And then I can remember waking up one morning, and I roll over, and she's sitting next to me, and she's sitting up in bed, and she's like, Earl, what happened to you last night? One minute you were happy, and the next minute you were manic and throwing plates, and I don't understand what's going on. Apparently that was my first blackout. And I said, I'm sorry, and it'll never happen again. I'll slow it down. And I truly meant it. But, years started rolling on by, and I can remember waking up one more morning, and she's sitting up in bed, only this time she's not really concerned. She's really pissed. She's had just about enough of it. All my promises that I'm going to get it together, but I can't get it together today. I still have 4 volume left. So let's try for this weekend, and I'll get it all together. And I'm so sorry. And I truly meant, but it just never kind of happened. And the years start rolling around, and now I'm 36 years old, and I can remember waking up one morning and she's gone, because one day she came home and she says, Earl, I'm not going to take it anymore. And I'm sure as hell not going to put the kids through this. So we're leaving, and here I am. Most of my teeth are gone at this point. Half my head is shaved, because apparently when I black out, I like to shave my head or cut my hair or something like that. And I always kind of wondered, why did I always do horrible things in a blackout? I never came out of a blackout like vacuuming the house or like doing the dishes. It was always some horrible, horrible thing, which I still don't understand to this day. But that's kind of how it went for me, I remember one night giving into it, where it kind of dawned on me that this is how life was going to be for me forever. And I accepted that. I said, as long as I got my booze and as long as I got my drugs, this is how it's going to be. And that was shortly before I got sober. But I specifically remember accepting the fact that this is how I was going to die. And I just let go of it. I said, okay, this is how it ends for me. And I just gave into it, and I drank and I drank and I drank. But on the morning of August 7th, 2013, I woke up on the floor one more time. I remember the room reeked of cigarettes, stale beer. I remember going into the kitchen and getting a bottle of peppermint schnapps out of the refrigerator, taking a couple swigs, going back into my room and eating a couple painkillers. I remember sitting there for a couple hours getting loaded. And I remember I got up to go outside to have a cigarette, and I turned the TV off, and for a split second, I caught my reflection in the TV screen. I could finally see myself. Not necessarily how I looked, but see me and everything I had gone through and what I have turned into. I could tell you, the man looking back at me, I had no idea who he was. And that was my moment of clarity. That was my surrender. Everything came. I remember slumping down on the ground, and I remember talking to God for the first time in a very long time. I said, God, I'm so very lost. And it was at that moment I felt surrounded by a presence I cannot explain to anybody else. I like to think I was surrounded by God at that time. I could feel so much love and warmth around me, and I knew it was over. I remember freaking out after that, and I remember I lost my breath, and I remember running out of the house and just crying and losing it. And I remember feeling the sun on my face and the wind in my hair for the first time in a really long time. I spent the rest of that day and that night just curled up in a ball in bed, and I just talked to God the whole time. I don't even remember going to sleep or if I did sleep, but I must have, because in the morning the phone rang, and it was my father. He was offering me a little side job for a neighbor or something like that, and he wanted to know if I'd like to do it. And I said, yes, I'd like to do it. And I was about an inch away for asking for help, but I just couldn't get up the courage to do that. But luckily, we hung up, and he called me back about 2 minutes later because he forgot to give me the phone number to that client. And it was then I told him I needed to talk to him. He said, when do you want to talk? I said, right now. And he said, come on over. I remember that drive over to his house was one of the longest drives of my life. It's only about 10 minutes, but it sure felt like an hour. Because I knew once I walked up to that door and walked in there and finally started telling somebody what was really going on with me, that there'd be no going back. So I walked in, I sat down with my dad, and I laid out everything that had been going on the last 24 years. I didn't hold back. I told him I can't function without drinking, and I can't leave the house without being loaded. I don't know how to function in life without being loaded. I must have it. I can't get up in the morning. I can't leave the house unless I got it. I told him everything, that Stacy didn't leave me because we were having, relationship problems. She left me because I'm a drunk and an addict. Everything came out. By the time I was done talking, my dad stood up and he gave me a big hug. He says, Earl, I love you. And then he walked into his office here, and he came out with a big book and a meeting directory. He says, Earl, I cannot walk this path for you. You have to do this one yourself, but I will always be there for you. I want you to go home, and I want you to read the doctor's opinion in this book. And if you can relate to anything that the doctor says, then you might be an alcoholic. So I went home, and I stopped at the liquor store on the way home and got a 22-ounce Rolling Rock. And I went home, and I cracked that big book, and I cracked that beer. And I read the doctor's opinion, and it blew me away. I still can't fathom to this day how this man could write a paper about my alcoholism some 40 years before I was even born. And that was the last drink I ever had, and that was August 9th, 2013. A couple of days later, I found myself going to my first AA meeting, big Torrance speaker meeting we had here at a hospital. I remember parking the car and walking up to these big glass double doors and looking inside, and there's about maybe, 300-400 people in that meeting. And being like, hell no, there's no way I'm going into this meeting. Everyone's laughing and hugging and talking and having a good time. And I turned around and I left, maybe about 10 feet from my car. This little old lady comes walking up to me and she says, "Hey, is this where the AA meeting is?" And I pointed, I said, "Yeah, it's right over there." And sorry, I get it's a tough one, but she put out her arm and asked me if I was going to go. I don't know who she is. I don't even know her name, but she saved my life. She walked me into my first AA meeting, this little old lady. Here I am, this, supposed to be strong guy or whatever, and I'm just such a baby, and I used her strength, and she carried me into my first meeting. Thank God for her. I think about her all the time. Every time I kind of reflect on how I started in AA and what she had done for me. I remember walking in. She says, "No, I never go to this meeting, but I flew out yesterday to visit my sister for her birthday. Thought I'd catch a meeting before I flew home tomorrow." And how much that really meant to me, and what that really taught me about the importance of going to meetings and carrying this message, and why, you don't sit at home and watch football when there's an opportunity to carry a message to someone. And that's really the important stuff I think that we do around here. Shortly after that, I got my sponsor and we started going through the steps. Before we ever opened the big book, we sat down and we talk about God. We talk about spirituality. It started to give me such a strength that I began to trust people again. I learned things that for every step I take towards God, he would take two towards me. And that God would always be there for me when nobody else was. It was that strength that kind of really started to open me up and make me honest with, my parents and all the people around me. I sat down with my sponsor and did a fifth step with him. After about 10 minutes of me talking, he says, "Earl, we can talk about your misdemeanors all day long, but until we start getting into your felonies, we're never really going to get anywhere. So let's start talking about what's really going on with you. I need to know the stuff that keeps you up at night. What robs you of your happiness?" That kind of stuff we really got into. I remember after that meeting, he gave me a big hug and he said, "Earl, tomorrow morning we're gonna meet again, and you're gonna start telling me all the stuff you're afraid to tell me right now, because your life depends on being honest. So that's what it takes to stay sober in this program." Following morning, we met at a McDonald's and sat down, and I spilled my guts to my sponsor in front of the Hamburglar and Grimace and Ronald McDonald. I always thought it'd be like some spiritual moment with clouds and birds, but no, it was the McDonald's. But I tell you, I wouldn't have it any other way right now, because that day meant everything to me. Having such a wonderful sponsor, and he didn't bat an eye about the stuff I had done and everything that I had gone through. It was that strength and how he treated me that really helped me get back into society and start trusting people again, that maybe I wasn't such a bad guy after all, and I could start really talking about what was going on with me. So when it came time to do my ninth step, I was ready. I talked to God a lot about that, and it was time to face all the harm I had caused to others. That's something I'd never looked at before I started going through these steps. Stacy, that girl I was with, I remember I took her out to dinner. We sat down and I was drinking tea and she was drinking sake. And, I apologized for being such a horrible boyfriend, and she apologized for not being the best girlfriend either, But I tell you, by the time she finished that sake, she definitely let me know what it was like to live with an alcoholic. She didn't hold anything back. She said, "Earl, I don't care that you used to spend our rent money. I don't care that we had bad Christmases because you decided to get loaded and throw up all over the place, throw a giant fit, and dinner would go flying across, whatever." She said the worst thing for her was coming home and not knowing what to expect when she walked through the front door. Whether I'd be happy one day, manic perhaps, in a giant fit of rage. She said it was the most petrifying thing in the world to know if I was dead or not on the sofa. That's the stuff that really got her, and that's the stuff I never really noticed, the effect my drinking would have on other people. I was always looking at the financial stuff or this stuff or that stuff or the lying, but it was really the horror I put on other people through my drinking that I never noticed, even while I was doing it. When it came time to sit down with my parents, it was the same thing. I sat down with my mom and started making my amends for dealing drugs out of her house and all the lies I told and all that kind of stuff. And she said, "Earl, I really don't care too much about that. But you and me were best friends. And when you turned 12, you disappeared. And now you're 36. Where the hell have you been?" It was the time I robbed from her of having time with her son that meant the most to her, not all the lying and all that crap. She didn't care about the money. My dad, on the other hand, he did care about the money and he wanted it back, like all of it. So, I sat down with my father and made my amends to him, and he said, "Earl, I don't care what you pay." $1 a month, whatever, but you will make a payment, and you got to start taking responsibility for this. And as you progress in your sobriety, you'll understand why. Of course, last year he comes up to me and he says, Earl, I'd like to be paid off before I'm dead. So if you can kind of speed up the process here, that would be good. And I'd like to tell you that, yes, last month I finally finished paying it off after almost coming up on 7 years now. Yeah, we finally got that in, which was a real blessing, and it's really kind of cool to share that with them. And now, as a family, we share this program together. We're open books with each other, and we discuss what's going on with us, and we don't hide anything from each other anymore. When I got problems, I can call them and talk to them open and honestly about what's going on with me. And they talk to me about what they're going through too. We're a lot closer, I think, because we get to share this program together. I work my program, she works her, and my dad's works his, and we don't butt into that. But when we need advice, we're always there for each other, and it's something that we kind of share. I guess that's kind of all I got, so I'll pass it back on to my mom and how it was for her.
Okay. Thanks, Earl. I know. I love you, buddy. Anyway, always so hard for me to talk after Earl does. It's such an emotional freaking roller coaster for me. Like I say, he's, I'd always hoped, when Earl was out there doing his thing, especially, after now, he's gone from childhood to actually becoming an adult in age. And, in age, where I was no longer legally responsible for, the pickles he would get into, and of course, as he's getting on in age and his disease is progressing. And I'm watching this, it's easier, and I am not going to be, it was a lot easier to release Earl and to love him unconditionally when he wasn't living under our roof. I am not going to kid about that. When it's not in your face every day and you see that behavior and those things that are going on every day, it's definitely easier. It was for me to be able to put my program in practice. While he was here, my sponsor would tell me, when you're dealing with the active disease, they're never going to cop to what's really going on or what's true. And I would find myself getting into these giant, long, drawn out arguments with him, trying to prove to him that I knew what he was doing and, that craziness. And that was driving me nuts. And so, so my sponsor told me, you have a right to say what's going on with you. You have a right to tell him what you know. She says, but you're going to tell him in 2 minutes or less. That's as long as you get to talk to him and confront him. You can walk in there, you can tell him what you know, and then you walk away. And I can't tell you how helpful that was to me. Because I'm not a person, in case you can't tell, that really stuffs her emotions too much. So, but I would go in there and I go, Earl, I know you're loaded out of your mind right now. You go ahead and tell me you haven't done a thing. I don't care. I don't need to prove it to you. I just need to let you know that I know that this is going on. And I'm here to tell you that I don't know how long your dad and I are going to tolerate this behavior in our home, but one day we may have to ask you to go. And I just want you to know that. And then I'd be done and I'd be out the door, because the family disease of alcoholism wants you to pound it into the ground until there's no life left in anybody. And so that helped me a lot, and Earl pretty much, I think 18, you were out the door.
Yeah, 18, 19.
Or something, because Earl wasn't going to live by our rules and our things, and part of the deal in our house is this is a sober house and you have to be here sober, and my husband got sober at 32, and as the years went on and I watched Earl, doing all this stuff, I was just, for whatever reason, I got 32 as the magic number in my head, that would be the year he got sober because he's so much like his dad. And so 32 kind of came and went, and that did not happen. And, but I want you to know that just having a number in my head brought me some kind of peace. Again, is that an Al-Anon thing or not? I don't know. But I think sometimes you have to have some hope. You have to have some kind of a thing that you can hold on to, and again, I want to revert back to my, the fellowship and my friendships. I specifically think of during this time of Kathy and Chris. We kind of all came in together. They were a couple years ahead of me when I started in Al-Anon, and we were all here because of our husbands. We all ended up here, with kids that turned out to be alcoholics, and now we're looking at some grandkids. I'm not looking at them because mine are younger, but I know Kathy's dealing with that right now, and the importance of having those friends in your life. We never judge each other. To me, that's just like the best thing in the world. We never tell each other how to fix each other or whatever. When we've all been going through the things with our specific kids, we've just always been very, very supportive of each other, and that's really, again, such a strength and hope that I get. And I want to thank them, and many people on, that I know that are on here, and hearing Earl talk, they've known Earl since he was a little kid, and stuff. And again, my gratitude towards them, because, Earl would always say no matter where he was, he'd be at a store and he'd run into one of my buddies in Al-Anon or one of Butch's friends in AA, and they would never give him the eye or do whatever, knowing the behavior. They would always, "Hi, Earl, good to see you," and I am grateful for that. We used to do an annual sober bus trip to Laughlin, and Earl was, I don't know, maybe in his 20s or something one time, and he wanted to come along. And so come Sunday when we're coming back, guess who's in the back of the bus so freaking hung over? And all the guys in AA were just giving him no end of grief. Just ribbing him and doing all this other kind of stuff.
That's a horrible bus ride.
I tell you though, but I was in the front just laughing my butt off. I'm grateful to those guys too. Because you got to accept the situation for what it exactly is, and the old me would have been, well, you can't come to us with Laughlin because what if you start drinking and what will my friends say, and I knew what my friends in AA when Al-Anon would say. We love you, Earl. We care about you, Earl, and stuff. And that just kind of kept reinforcing that for myself. So anyway, like I said, Earl ended up being gone, at a certain age and, when he was 18. And so that meant when he came home, he always tried to be respectful. I will tell you that Earl was always respectful of his dad's sobriety. He knew that that's what was happening here. And I think he was always respectful of that. So when he came here, the deal was you need to be sober, and that meant, family occasions, Christmas, birthdays, whatever, sometimes Earl could come and sometimes Earl could not come. And when he could come, it was absolutely great. But sometimes he couldn't come and he couldn't stay very long. It was just like I could see his uncomfortableness. And he would have to go. And I just know that I would hug him. Thank you for coming. And I love you very much, and then he would, go out there and do his deal and whatever. And like I say, I had this magic age of 32 and that kind of came and went. And then it was 33 and then it was 34 and then it was 35. And, but I still got to keep practicing. And that's what Al-Anon is about. To me, it's about practice. Sometimes I'd handle it better than other days. Sometimes not so much, but like, when Earl had that moment and he called his dad, I was at work, Butch was home, Butch was retired, I think at that point. And after, Earl had been here and gone home, Butch calls me at work and I answer the phone and my husband goes to me, well, you were right, and I'm like, I'm always right. So I didn't know what he was talking about, but I was like, so what am I right about now? And he says, Earl came in, he's got a problem with drugs and alcohol. And, so I gave him and I go, oh my God, what did you do? What did you do? And he goes, I gave him a big book and and a meeting directory and the names of like 2 or 3 people in AA, and I go, and he goes, and that's it. He's got to do this thing on his own. And I'm like freaking out. And, and again, how I think God was working in Earl's life is I wasn't home when he came over here because, thank God is right. Because I'd be jumping on it, taking him to meetings, doing, being his AA guru guy or something because I want him to get well. And I really believe sometimes that God literally pushes us out of the way so the people that we love can find sobriety. And, but I let that be what it was. And I called Earl when I got home. I asked him if there was anything that I could do for him. And he just said he was reading and doing this. If he needed anything, he would call me. And I think he called me the next day. And I picked him up and he came over and we had lunch and whatever. And then I took him back home and, and then he had that experience about going to that meeting, and if I interfered like I wanted to interfere with every fiber of my being, then I don't know that he would have met that old lady that walked him into that meeting. And I think that had a lot more impact on him than his mother ever would have. Sometimes we got to let God work like God's going to work. The problem for me is God never works at the speed I want him to work. And, or necessarily get the outcome that I think that I am looking for. So when Earl talks about that lady taking him to that meeting, again, it's just kind of like, I believe, it's, and for the parents, that are still out there, carrying all those guys. Again, if loving them could fix them, we certainly would, none of us need to be here. But, I believe Earl got sober, not because of anything I ever said or did, whether, what if big wheel handlebars were on backwards or any of that kind of garbage, we're all looking for what did I do wrong? I think Earl got sober for the same reason that I got into Al-Anon and try and work in this program to the best of my ability, why we're all here, and that's because there was a window and I accepted God's grace in that moment, and I think Earl had that window, the day he got to see himself and his reflection in the TV screen, that was his moment, of grace with God. And we either walk through that thing or you don't. And that's really what it's all about for me on a daily basis. It's just accepting God's grace in my life. And Earl got sober because he accepted God's grace in his life. I want you to know, Earl and I have had the opportunity to talk together a few times. And inevitably, after every time, some parent will walk up to Earl after we're done talking and will say, please tell me how I can get my kids sober. Because they in your heart, you still want to believe there's something you think that you can do. So Earl becomes more and more aware of what it looks like from the, this kind of a side of it, and believe you me, Earl and I wish we could tell you what that was, but I think Earl will agree. It's just kind of like when he decided, and I think once you make that decision for the AA as well as for the Al-Anon, when I accept God's grace in my life, guess what? He puts all these marvelous people. They don't fix it for me. They just show me one day at a time. You don't have to do this, 12, 14, 16 years. You have to just do it one day at a time. And God puts those people in my life that helps me be able to get through it. And along the way, happy, joyous, and free. We get to find this stuff out and we get to work it out. And, and it's great to sit here with a sober son. I am not going to pretend that sucks because it does not. I am so, so grateful every single day for my son's sobriety. But I also know, that is his gift, God's gift to him. My gift to me is being an Al-Anon. Our gift to each other is that we do get to share this program. I need to remember all the time, Earl is not a little kid anymore. He is a grown man. He is a man in his 40s. And I get to treat him like that. I get to let him to make his life decisions, whatever he decides. I, again, don't always agree with some of the stuff he's doing or how he's doing it. When he was picking his sponsor, my husband gave him a list of a couple of people, none of which I would have given to Earl, no way in a million years. And then and who does the guy he picks for his sponsor? Like the guy that's the last on my list, and who turned out to be the world's best sponsor for Earl. I just, and now I love this man beyond, what I can even begin to tell you. But again, see, left to my own devices, many years in Al-Anon, what I still think is good for Earl. I have to keep the focus on me. What do I need? What do I need so that again, what's my job here? And my job here is to be the mom, not the son. My job is to be the wife, not the husband. And if I focus on what my job is, then I am much more accepting of letting them do their job to the best of their ability. And that is, again, it's a hard thing for me sometimes, but it's what, it's what I need to do. And it's what gives us a life that's full. And Earl talks about, our ability now as a family to come together. I have another son who's even older than Earl. And my son Bill is married. He's provided me with my 2 grandkids and all of that. And, Bill's not in the program. When Bill was a teenager at the same time Earl was, he's 3 years older than his brother. Bill got busted for possession of cocaine and even went into AA for 3 months and then announced to me one night he wasn't in AA by coming home and, puking his brains out, and that kid gave us a roller coaster ride as well. But right in his early 20s, he met somebody, we started dating, and then he just stopped doing it. He just kind of grew up and moved on with his life, and now he's a man in his later 40s married with 2 kids and, and a great dad and, working and, and he still drinks beer and I think he still probably smokes marijuana on occasion, whatever. But I have to accept him for who he is and what he is. And he's a wonderful person. And that's really, to me, if you want to know what Al-Anon is about, it's about love. It's about loving people exactly where they are. I think Carrie described that really well. If her daughter's an addict, just to love her, just that's what she is. I still love her and I still care about her and I always will. And I think when we're able to do that, then we're able to, have some happy, joyous, and free in our life. We get the shot at a good life if we so choose to take it. And I'm here to tell you, and it looks like, oh, look at, Larcine, my husband's coming up on 41 years sobriety. And, my son's coming up on 7. I'm 39 years in Al-Anon yesterday. And, and it's all, wonderful and it's wonderful, but life keeps moving on and things keep happening. And so for this week, it's been a real mixed bag for my family. I mean, Earl and I get this opportunity to share. I turned 39, and then Tuesday, my husband got diagnosed with liver cancer. And so we're just kind of wrestling with all of that right now, just doing doctor's appointments and, trying to get all that. We have 3 doctor's appointments next week. My husband has had, when he was 25 years sober, he was diagnosed with Hep C. And up until that point, it had never done anything. And then all of a sudden it took off. And, then he went through 14, 15 years of different treatments until they finally came out with this new drug, 5 years ago that finally got rid of his Hep C, but not before it did a boatload of damage to his liver. So, 30 something years in, to AA, my husband's, got really bad cirrhosis. And now he's coming up on 41. And as a result of that cirrhosis, he went for a routine test. And for his ultrasound, something showed up. He got an MRI, and now he's got 2 lesions on his liver. And so we're seeing a surgeon on Monday and a radiologist on Tuesday and another guy on Thursday, oncologist, whatever. These appointments are all lined up. And I don't know what that's going to bring or what that's going to look like. And, and as I've heard so many people here say today, I'm telling you, 39 years in Al-Anon. And, the first thought that came to me when I got that diagnosis, my fault. I should have watched his diet better. I should have been doing this, should have been doing that. When does that thinking ever go away? I don't know when it ever goes away. But again, one more time, what I know today about me is that's the thinking that I have. But what Al-Anon has done is this has well armed me. I have the tools to deal with that thinking if I so choose to use them. And so it's right away. What I had to get back to is, what? That's a bunch of BS. What is happening is just plain old happening. I can blame whatever. But again, the family disease of alcoholism always wants me to concentrate on the problem, whose fault it was, who started it, blah, blah, blah. And what Al-Anon wants me to do is focus on what the solution is. And if you ask Butch today where he is, he'll tell you that he's in chapter 2 of the big book of AA. There is a solution, and I want to be there right along with him. I want to be there with him. I don't know where it's going to end, and again, what I'm supposed to pray for, what I'm not supposed to pray for. But I know that I am going to pray for strength. I'm going to pray to be the wife that he would have me be, to be as supportive and loving, and to try and help him make the decisions that we need to make. And most importantly of all, that we stay in the moment. And right now, everything is perfectly okay. It is just okay. And I don't want to miss the okay stuff that's going on right now. I don't want to miss it. I spend so much of my life worrying about people and just being angry, because that's just how I react. Because I go from worry to being pissed off, because I would much rather let you see me be pissed off than let you ever see me be afraid and be honest with what's going on with me. And I'm here to tell you, all the times that Earl was out there, I learned really early on, it was so much easier for me to fall asleep at night praying than it was worrying. So that's kind of, how I and that's how I'm going to kind of tackle this. And as a family, we're just going to be there for each other. We have so much love and support from all of you. And I know that, and it means a lot. I have a lot of faith and prayer. And again, and it's not about the outcome. It's that you guys are going to pray for us, that we're going to walk through this like a family, and that we're just going to be okay. And that's just really what it is, because today it is okay. So Earl and I want to thank you guys.